But cool. So let's talk about AI and the impending AI revolution. I want to help you understand like what's happening with all the products and technologies that are coming out, and how can you make sure that your engineering team is going to be prepared to embrace it. So my name is Loyd Pearson. I'm director of developer experience at a company called LinearB that builds developer productivity platforms. I'm also the host of a podcast in Substack called Dev Interrupted, where we reach a community of about 20,000 engineering leaders every week with topics on developer productivity, developer experience, and increasingly AI enablement, because that seems to be all that anyone ever wants to talk about anymore. So let's dive in. And I apologize, I didn't give you advanced warning, but there is a pop quiz to start this. Don't worry, I will give you plenty of time to think about your answer. If you figure it out, don't shout it out. Like, let your neighbor like think about it for a moment, and then I'll give everyone a moment to share your answer all at once here in just a minute. So, pop quiz: 2 + 2 equals blank. Now, while you think about that, let's cover the agenda. So I'm first going to cover why AI struggles with universal truths and why that's a problem for your organization. Then I'm going to briefly cover some history and set the stage for where we are today. After that, we'll talk about risks in the organization. And then finally, I'm going to give you a very simple framework for mapping your journey towards the AI-driven future. So let's get back to our pop quiz. So hope you've had enough time to think about the answer to this. And if this is the only time I'm going to ask you to participate, so I would love it if everyone could say their answer together with me. So 2 + 2 equals 22. Yeah. 22. And I forgot to mention that these are actually typed strings, so we're concatenating them. We're not actually adding them. But don't worry how you answered. I'm going to make a point that no matter what you said, you're actually correct. And that brings us to the paradox of universal truths, or what it's like to have a conversation with infinite regress. So many of you might know my answer as a wonderful convention from JavaScript, where we're actually concatenating two strings. I love how if you were then to subtract a 2 string from it, you would actually get back to a number, which is just brilliant. But this concept has shown up in many places. Like if you're familiar with the book 1984, they use 2 + 2 equals 5 as an allegory to, it's based on Soviet propaganda about how like reality doesn't always align with like concrete truth. But marketers will use it as well, like bad math. There's philosophers that have discussed it in the past. So it really is a very common theme. Or even in the case of like a timed test, which I used to love in elementary school, where the actual correct answer is just blank. Like it's when you're creating the test, there's not actually supposed to be a number after it. And then of course the student's going to fill it out, but then if they get it wrong, it's not going to be 4 anyways. So my point here is that you need to consider that AI views this as a sequence of tokens. So it actually breaks down each of these characters, the character 2, the character plus, into a token, and strings that together. So in that context, there's actually a fairly high probability that what comes after this is something other than 4. And so, in other words, as I mentioned, we're all correct. Linguistically speaking, these are all correct answers to the 2 + 2 equals blank problem. And the problem with that is that your engineering team has universal truths for what software quality is. Your secrets need to be kept secure and safe from the internet. Dependencies shouldn't have security vulnerabilities. Code should compile and run and be deployable. But the problem is that AI is a high accurate actor, but a low precision performer. So what I mean by that is AI is really good at getting to a recognizable end state based on the input criteria that you give to it. But it's not so great at making every decision along the way correct. So if you were to look at this and just glance at it, you could probably accurately identify what it is. It's a dartboard with darts in it. But then you have to spend a little more mental effort to see that there's actually a lot of mistakes in this. Like the colors are off, the numbers are all wrong. Some of the darts are missing components. The angles are weird. And this like perfectly represents my, and my favorite part is there's a damned. Like, have you ever seen a desktop dartboard? Because I've never seen one. Um, but my point is that it's that these AI models accurately portray this concept, right? Like, this is an accurate portrayal of a dartboard with darts. What I also love about this is I've been giving variations of this talk long enough that that image is actually from early last year, and I went back and tried to redo it again for this talk, using all of the knowledge I've gained in that time about how to do prompt engineering and chain prompts together and provide context. And I haven't really gotten that much closer. I have gotten really good at getting super accurate Dart illustrations, which is neat, but there's still lots of problems. And what I'm really trying to get is to actually represent this. Like, this is high accuracy, low precision. Like, you're getting in the general vicinity of the right answer, but you're not hitting the bullseye. So going back to the statement of your engineering team has universal truths for software quality, but introducing a high accuracy and low precision actor into your organization creates a lot of risk, primarily because humans are actually very poor at identifying errors for precision. Like, you can easily identify the dartboard. You may not have even noticed the precision problems until I started calling them out. And that leads to how we got here, in the history of how we got to where we are today. Today, I'm asking often, is this model smarter than my 4-year-old? When I first started giving this talk, it was my 2-year-old, and it's kind of amazing how it's actually like tracked pretty accurately for that. Especially after seeing, I don't know if anyone saw Claude try to play Pokemon Red, but like its pattern recognition in the video game universe was just like astoundingly bad. So this will probably be the briefest history you've ever gotten on AI. So many years ago, researchers figured out how to get computers to make decisions in a similar pattern to our brains. Many years later, a bunch of companies dedicated an immense amount of resources to training the largest models in history, also that people like me could generate images like this. But to dive a little bit deeper into the technology, so that's the brief history. Let's look at just the last 5 years and see how the technologies have emerged. So a lot of this is probably going to be familiar with for you guys. In 2021, Copilot came out that gave you predictive typing in your IDE, gave you a little bit of natural language to code. In 2022, ChatGPT popularized this concept of a conversational interface into resources. So you can feed it your code, you can feed it docs, white papers, Reddit, Stack Overflow, and actually have a conversation with that resource. In 2023, we saw the emergence of tools like Cursor, and if anyone remembers Devin, that made a huge waves back then. They introduced this concept of agentic AI. Last year, Anthropic brought the concept of the Model Context Protocol to the world, MCP. Probably heard that phrase a lot. People are talking about it a lot. People are building their own MCP servers for just about everything today. And then the most recent development is just like a month or two ago when Google announced the agent-to-agent protocol, along with about 50 industry partners. And the goal being to build better inter-agent communication systems so that your Google agent can talk to your Zoom agent, to your Jira agent, like all of that type of stuff. And what I think we're really heading towards is this future of like AI driven software development. And I think we can break just the last 5 years down into like these 3 high level phases. So we had our AI co-pilots. We're transitioning through this period of like agentic AI. And then soon, I think we're going to see more and more AI driven workflows emerging within the typical software organization. And I'll get to what that means in a few minutes. But I want to just dive into each one of these a little bit to just provide some more context. So let's talk about the impact of AI co-pilots. So to summarize, these are pretty much ubiquitous in most software engineering organizations today. The Stack Overflow developer survey from last year said about 78% of developers are now using AI in their normal day-to-day. So like overnight, it practically became ubiquitous. And they're enabling developers to create more code than ever before. But that's introducing quality risks. Like, more code does not mean more productivity. And what's up? The legend over. Yeah. I'll get to it. Yeah. I appreciate it. Yeah, it's hard to fit all the images, especially when I'm taking them from other people. And this trend of more code is accelerating, right? Um, there's been quite a few research articles published on this topic from a whole bunch of different companies about the productivity improvements of AI copilots. The general consensus is most organizations see somewhere between 10 to 30% productivity improvement. However you measure that, like that's a nebulous term that has a lot of meanings. And this is great, but it's also like a pretty far cry from what like the AI evangelists out there are saying with like 10x and 100x promises. Spending 20 bucks a month and getting like 10% productivity improvement, like that's actually not too bad. Um, but this is also not without caveats. So the chart that is very difficult to read over there, it comes from a company called GetClear, who publishes a report on this every year. And they're showing how some of the trends that have changed in software development since 2021. So the blue line is more code being added to repositories, so the volume of code is going up. The dark red line that's right below it is code churn. So that's code that is created and then thrown away in short order and like paved over effectively. Um, the green line that's falling off a cliff is code that's moved. So you can kind of read that as a proxy for like refactoring, like developers are refactoring far less than they used to. And the orange line that's starting to trend up a little bit is copying and pasting. So you can almost read that like AI is just replicating existing things in more places rather than looking at existing code and fundamentally refactoring it for evolving use cases. Um, so some risk, so some trends that have happened from this, and like I said, the productivity improvements are happening. They're just not massive. But where things really start to get exciting is when we start talking about agentic AI. So I mentioned Cursor. They made waves by being, I guess, the first or the fastest company to ever achieve 100 million ARR. Rumor has it that they are now the fastest company to ever achieve 200 million ARR, which is pretty extraordinary considering that they're, I think, less than 50 people still. And the difference between this era and the Copilot era is being able to programmatically leverage complex AI workflows. So now it's not just prompting an AI model; it's automating the process of stringing together multiple prompts to plan, to build, to validate, to test. And there's a good chance you've heard this phrase like vibe coding, which I've tried. I'll get into in a minute. It's a somewhat derogatory term that is basically used to describe somebody who's doing agentic AI in an ignorant manner. So they're using AI agents, but they don't actually know what's happening. Like that's vibe coding. But in the right hands, this is actually, I think, going to be an extremely powerful force multiplier for people who can maintain control and orchestrate AI agents. And we have two really fascinating recent examples with some research behind them. The first comes from Google, and I published a summary of this to the LinearB blog. But they've been running experiments with agentic AI for the last year to migrate code from 32-bit to 64-bit architecture, which is a fairly routine task. However, it's also very time-consuming, tedious, takes developers a lot of time, pulls away from like more strategic work. The Google built this human-in-the-loop workflow that you see in the upper right that is mostly led by the AI, but has humans come in a couple of key spots within the process to provide oversight and guidance to them. So specifically, humans are categorizing the architecture changes. I forget the categories they broke them down into, but they have like 4 or 5 different categories that the human would make sure they got processed correctly. And then they would do the final code review before it got deployed to production. So over the year of doing this, they did 39 different migrations with it across 600 code changes, and the LLM generated about 75% of the code that they ultimately merged into their main repo. They asked their developers how much time they thought they saved. They said 50% time savings. So you always have to take like qualitative surveys with a grain of salt when it comes to productivity improvements. But generally speaking, if someone says I feel significantly faster, they're probably They probably are. And then it also comes with the typical like AI limitations, like they had hallucinations, they had issues with context windows for some of them. There was a lot of uneven language support. So these are like common themes you're just going to hear all of the time. And I'm going to cover in a moment just how critical like the human oversight side of this is. And then one more example I just want to really briefly cover is it comes from Meta, who has been using LLMs to expand their mutation testing, specifically around data privacy concerns. They used a very similar like agentic AI workflow that had a few human in the loop moments to correct potential mistakes. And I'll just jump all the way to the conclusion on this one. When the WhatsApp and the Messenger teams used this tool, they ended up accepting 73% of the recommendations. That's the highlighted number you see down there, and they rejected 27% of them. So Mark Zuckerberg has been in the news saying that like AI is writing the code, like 50% of their code of a like intermediate engineer or something like that. And there's a lot of other founders saying stuff like that. And I think this is what they're talking about. They're not talking about like replacing developers with a prompt that like creates the next feature. They're automating these like more routine tasks that they may not have even done this in the past. Like they just would have put it off forever because it would have taken too much effort to make this happen. So I think this is when you hear these claims of like it's writing extraordinary amounts of code, it's probably true for some situations and for stuff that is less strategic to that business. And then this brings us to what I think is the impending shift towards more AI-driven development. This is definitely a little forward-looking. We aren't seeing a lot of this in reality yet. It's more like I just want to set the stage for where I think things are going next, and that is that AI is going to increasingly take over tasks that are outside of the typical like software creation process. We still have a long ways to go with this, but I think this ship has set sail, and we're well on the way. So I mentioned Dev Interrupted. One of the things that we're doing right now is a research project, and I know, sorry, there's a lot of small text again, but I'll explain what all of that is. So we're in the midst of this research right now. We just got the final results. These are early results. They don't quite reflect the final output that we have. I just didn't have time to pull that into this presentation. But the goal is for us to understand how teams are adopting AI tools across the SDLC. So we broke the SDLC down into 13 discrete steps. So it's like creating a project, like starting all the way at the beginning and going all the way to the code into production. So creating the project management task, designing the architecture, creating a requirements document, writing the code, writing the docs, opening the PR, writing the PR description, deploying the code to production. And we asked a very simple question. Who managed the task? Was it a human? Was it AI? Or was it mixed? Did you work with AI? The light or the bluish color is AI, so pure AI. The lighter color is people who said mixed, so they worked with AI. And then the dark is all the stuff that is still completely managed by a human. So no surprises here. AI is starting to take over a lot of the development process, so the stuff in the middle of this pipeline. Specifically, writing PR descriptions, writing tests and documentation, and writing and reviewing code. We're seeing a pretty quick adoption of AI tooling. The PR descriptions is a really interesting one to me because I've been saying for a little while now that that's one of the easiest low risk ways to just incorporate AI just immediately into your workflows. But what really catches my attention is all the greenfield that is still left outside of development. So specifically, there's a very negligible amount of AI-driven work happening in the planning phase. There is a fair amount, and our final results show a little bit more AI and mixed responses. But for the most part, like it's almost exclusively handled by humans at this point. So really, it's like humans are still deciding what to do, prioritizing tasks, defining requirements, building technical architecture. Yeah, so if like I also see this as a big business opportunity. I'm like, where's Atlassian? Because I feel like this entire top part of this should be owned by them, but no one has really solved this yet. So if you're an entrepreneur, think about it. So just to summarize, like AI is doing pretty good at the stuff on the left here, not so good at the right. And really what it comes down to is it's getting good at creating stuff. It's not so good at the inputs and outputs yet. But I think that's going to change with time. So, and that dichotomy creates risk. So not only do you have a dichotomy between parts of your SDLC, but you also have a dichotomy between how one team or one organization or business unit adopts AI and how another one does. And that difference is where a lot of the risk and bottleneck comes from with this. So I've identified 6 that I want to talk about today. And I also want to take just another moment to plug Dev Interrupted. We love to draw as much insight as we can from our community of engineering leaders. We've interviewed a lot of brilliant people that are doing amazing work with technology. So this is just going to be me going through these risks and bottlenecks and talking about some guests that we've had in the past that do a really great job at breaking this down. So start with some risks. And the first I want to talk about are data silos and knowledge gaps. So agentic AI is going to rely on access to your knowledge. So that's your code, that's your issue trackers, your documentation, your project planning resources, information about team norms and architecture decisions. It needs all of this stuff to have the context that it is required to act effectively. But the problem is that in the typical organization, that information is relatively fragmented. And it may even be trapped in like tribal knowledge that's just inaccessible to other teams. And if that's the case, any AI agents you deploy will be acting on incomplete, outdated data that is going to increase risk and reduce the effectiveness of it. So if you have problems like inconsistent or missing documentation, that's going to slow down your AI adoption attempts. So this is Brandon Jung. He is the VP of Ecosystem at Tab9, which is an AI company. And he came on our show and talked about how effective AI integration requires this like centralized, accessible, and continuously updated knowledge source. You need data transparency and provenance to make your models more easy to validate and like just more effective. So you want to know and why, like what was the context behind that data being created and provided into these models. And a big point that he made was that specialized models, where you can really have some effective AI adoption is by applying specialized models that are trained on idealistic source data. So he mentions this like concept of a golden repo, like have the perfect resource, like a code base that represents your perfect, or it's near to perfect representation of what code at your organization or within your project looks like, so that you can feed into models as a trained resource to get them to be more consistent.
Question about 30.
Yeah, go ahead. I think
talk about this. Like in order to do something like that idealized kind of like say you have a framework that you built, you want people to use the framework. Would you have to supply a ton of code in order to train, like the amount that you would have to supply?
Yeah. Well, if you're providing a ton of anything, you always run into context window issues. So
I'm trying to figure out, like, is it enough to train anything on? If it's, like you're trying to produce something that's
it's a balance. Like I've had success if I have something that's too big for a context window, I usually try to go upstream a little bit from that and try to like break it down into like more like digestible chunks, so to speak. So it may not be the entire source. It may be like a summary of a portion of that source with like the data behind it. Yeah, that's a tough challenge. But it actually ties into the recommendation I have for you all today, and that is the more you can start thinking about that and establishing these data hygiene practices, create those resources of high quality training data. Like you can start doing that today, and it will benefit your human developers today, and then your agentic developers in the coming years. Yeah, this is right. The next risk I want to talk about is tooling and infrastructure debt. So The problem here is that agentic AI is going to require tooling that is not yet widespread in most teams. So I'm thinking about observability for AI agents, sandboxing testing environments to like try out new agents, AI native CI/CD. Like a lot of this stuff just simply does not exist yet. So this is Corey O'Daniel. He's the CEO and co-founder of MassDriver. He came on our show and talked about how, well, he first of all empathized. Like tooling debt is very common. Like most teams rely on like either it's like outdated tooling or they have a lot of manual operations that don't have a whole lot of automation or maybe lack a self-service capability. And then further, most companies still depend or depend on ticket-based services. So Jira, ServiceNow, like those aren't always going to be scalable for an agentic environment. And then lastly, like developers are often like burdened with more and more infrastructure and security and compliance tasks that might be outside of their expertise. And those are only going to get magnified by agentic AI. So some things you can start doing today. The first is building a good platform engineering function within your organization. You should have a team whose goal is to abstract the complexity of building software at your organization without adding any sort of infrastructure overhead. So this could be a dedicated team. It could be an individual who you say is like our head of DevEx or developer productivity, something like that. But the more you start investing in that today, the more prepared you'll be to help your developers adopt AI. And maybe you already are investing in this stuff because many organizations are today. Well, now's the time to mature that. Like I've heard a lot of talk about how, particularly when you're talking about like this week when you're talking about app modernization, the need more than ever to have these automated controls through CI/CD, through static analysis, through whatever tools you have to enforce quality. Those are only getting more important as AI generates more and more code. Sorry, I need a drink. And then the last risk I want to talk about is oversight, governance, and trust. So autonomous agents are going to start making decisions within your organization if they're not already today. They're going to be merging PRs. They're going to be deploying hot fixes. Maybe sometimes they'll do it automatically from error reports. And this is going to raise some pretty serious concerns about things like safety, auditability, and accountability. So this is Brooke Hartley Moy, the CEO and co-founder of InFactory. And she shared with us about how, even though LLMs are probabilistic, like that's kind of like the whole opening of my talk is about how they're probabilistic. Yet some people try to treat them as deterministic, right? Like don't ask AI to do math. You could potentially ask AI to write code to do math, but I wouldn't ask it to do math. And further, the black box nature of these systems makes it really hard to trace reasoning or even ensure explainability. Like if you've ever experienced the like AI hallucinating or doing something wrong, and you're like, hey, why'd you do that? And it's like, oh, of course I didn't consider this factor, and then it fixes it, but then it makes 4 other wrong assumptions. It's very hard to actually like trace a problem when it happens with AI. And she had a quote that I really loved, and that is, close enough is not good enough, especially when you're in a high risk environment. So if you work in finance, if you work in healthcare, or just any other thing that has like mission critical aspects, like you can't accept like a 15% hallucination rate. Like that is just completely unacceptable. So things you can start doing today. Well, actually, before I get to that, so the goal here should be to build transparency. Like governance shouldn't be viewed as a blocker within this stuff. When you do governance right, it creates guardrails that shows developers the easiest path to follow. So they just naturally follow it because like why would they do the hard route, So what you can start doing today is building better audit trails and trustworthy data sources so that you can reliably validate agent decisions. So if you have really high quality source data and controls around AI, you can easily build layers that force it to validate itself, so that when an error comes up, it sort of gets a feedback loop that either a human-led feedback loop or an automated feedback loop that can resolve that. And you also want to like normalize this practice of these human in the loop mechanisms. So both the Meta and Google example I showed earlier, that was something I think was a really critical component of getting those workflows to work right. I do a lot of content, and we've also started adopting that sort of mentality where we might have, you know, two groups of steps that AI can sort of do a bunch in between, but then the human gets plugged in at critical moments to validate things. So you want that human in the loop mechanism, but you also need robust automated policy enforcement. So as these tools get adopted, like don't force your developers to don't shift left the responsibility of compliance onto your developers without giving them the tools to quickly take action in an understandable way. So what I mean by that is if their AI usage is going off the rails or something like that, don't put all the effort on the developer to determine that. Like give them an automated system that can help like set them in the right direction when they encounter problems. All right, so I'll move on to a couple of the bottlenecks that I've identified, and the one I'll start with is workflow integration. So to adopt agentic AI, you're going to have to plug it into many stages of your SDLC. Like that's your planning tools, like your project management, your code repositories, testing environments, the code review workflows, deployment pipelines. Like every single one of these things within the next couple of years is going to have either AI built into it or direct integrations with whatever AI you're using. So this is Amir Behbani. He's the chief AI engineer and founder of Memra. He shared some insights with us about, just the reality that like most developer environments lack a native support for autonomous and interagent systems, and which is going to limit like seamless workflow execution. So a lot of existing infrastructure treats tools like more like isolated functions rather than like an integrated workflow. And when you start layering AI on top of them, they become much more of a like integrated workflow rather than like in disconnected tool. So think about it this way: like if AI can't access your project management data, can you expect it to have the complete context it needs to give your developers the information they need to make the right decisions? But to really complicate this is that there's no standardized protocol yet. So if you're trying to build this stuff today, you're doing it custom. And this has been a big contributing factor to why AI hasn't just taken over the SDLC. Like it's just going to take a while to build out this infrastructure. I mentioned the A2A protocol from Google earlier, where they are tackling this problem, but it's only just begun. We still have a long journey ahead of us. But what you can start doing today, chances are there are still some low-hanging fruit within your organization that are ripe for autonomous AI to start taking over. Specifically, any tasks that consume a lot of time, have a really strong API integration, and a standardized usage and adoption path within your organization. So all of that just gives you enough consistency and context to keep these models on Rails. This is all going to be bespoke for the next 6, 12, maybe 18 months. The products just aren't there yet. Those are going to come later, most likely. So again, for any budding entrepreneurs, lots of greenfield. I'm going to have to go a little quick. The next bottleneck, human to agent friction. So simply put, your developers probably aren't used to collaborating with AI agents yet, especially ones that take initiative. So today they're probably, if they are using AI, they're prompting it, they're going to it and saying, this is what I would like to accomplish. In the future, I think that script is going to get completely flipped. The AI agents will be doing work, and then they will prompt the human when they need support, like they need to be corrected or validated or approved. And the issue is that if these agents are misaligned with your team goals, you're going to create friction and inefficiency. So anytime you ask a developer to override an agent's decision, you're adding cognitive burden to their life. And And again, automation without guardrails is going to lead to review overload, especially when you consider the volume of code that these agents are going to be deploying. And it's really important, like this is a point that Tara brought up, it's really important to distinguish between automated and autonomous so that you don't have misplaced expectations. Like build pipelines are still going to be pretty deterministic, whereas like planning is a little more probabilistic, right? And you just want to resist the urge to AI everything when the cost of implementing it like outweighs the benefits. So some things you can start doing today. So on the deterministic side, focus on automating guardrails to reduce mental load. Like I mentioned, like not letting this shift left onto developers, the responsibility of it. Like have your DevEx team, your platform engineers focused on reducing the overhead of adopting these workflows. And then on the probabilistic side, like there's got to be some cultural change around this too. Like particularly early on, there was a lot of fear and uncertainty around AI, and then I think as people get their hands on it, they start to see the potential, and then they get into that like trough of disillusionment. But there's a whole cultural like shift that everyone is just going to need. Like as an engineering leader, you can help that happen. And then the last bottleneck is feedback loops. So we don't really have a lot of mechanisms to like determine the quality of agentic decisions. There's a lot of engineering metrics out there. Some of them are more short term than others. Like PRs per engineer. Like chances are that's going to go up when you have AI doing like 10x the PRs. So this is Soumya Subramanian. She previously worked in engineering at Google. She was also, I think, a VP at Warner Brothers Discovery. She's worked on some really amazing projects. And she came onto our show to talk about the importance of feedback loops and how they can be effective at balancing speed, quality, and AI decision making. So more AI generated code is going to create or it increases the need for human feedback more than ever. Like humans are actually becoming more important as AI gets rolled out, particularly around like validation, reviews, that kind of stuff. But a lot of teams, or most teams, just don't have that like robust signal-rich environment to like learn and improve the process. So the more you can do to start investing in tooling and process that help you create like structured ways to provide sustainable feedback, like there's a lot of metrics frameworks out there like Dora and Space, and like basically all of the big tech companies at this point have like published their viewpoint on like what productivity is and like how to make sure developers are effective. Whatever you prefer. The important thing is that today you start standardizing your organization's definitions around those and provide ownership or establish ownership to improve that signal clarity. So, just taking like cycle time from the Dora metrics, for example, like to measure that, you need to know when work starts and when work's finished. And those two things can actually vary widely between two different teams. So the more you can do to just establish what your practice is and who's the owner of that, the better, because then you can start applying those metrics to your agentic AI as it comes out. And then also, like, she also stressed the importance of proactive data-driven rituals to institutionalize those feedback loops. So things like monthly metrics meetings, developer coaching programs, cross-functional postmortems, like start bringing more and more data into those and just like habitualize them so that feedback gets institutionalized. All right, last section, what to expect next. So the future is scary and unpredictable. And the advice I give today, much of it may lose relevance within the next 12 months, but I'm hoping I can help you at least understand where you are right now and what to expect next. So to start, I want to share this extremely simple collaboration matrix we made as a partnership between Dev Interrupted and LinearB. Call it the AI collaboration matrix. You can use this to plot your work on a spectrum with human-led process and human production in the bottom left, and AI-led process and AI production in the top right. And I'll explain what this means. But at a high level, all of software engineering was in the bottom left quadrant of this matrix before 2021 because there simply wasn't AI introduced to their tool. We're all on a journey to the upper right, and that journey looks very different for all of us. But the simplest way to understand this is just to map each one of your pull requests onto this matrix. So if you want to do this yourself, I actually have a really short quiz that I'll share at the end so that you can figure this out. But if you were to take like your entire organization, or maybe just your PRs over the last month, it could end up looking something like this chart. Within your organization, you probably have people who have just gone, like they love AI, they've fully embraced it, they're way up in the upper right of this quadrant doing really cool things with it. Then you might have other teams that just haven't found a value or found any use cases where it works, and they're completely still in the bottom left quadrant. And then other teams are, somewhere else. The important point is to know where you stand, because it can help you understand discrepancies in your organization. So one trend we are seeing as we dive into this concept more and more is that junior developers are much more likely to use AI to produce assets, so to create code, to create documentation, tests. Whereas senior developers are a lot more likely to use it to help inform their decision making, and then they do a lot of the production work themselves still. They might have AI create a mock, but then they're going to go and do the code themselves. It also helps you understand how tools might push you in one direction versus the other. So Copilot, at least the early versions of it, primarily focused on producing more code rather than process. Codo is a code review tool that kind of helps with process side of things a little more than production. And then you have tools like Cursor, who are kind of a blend of both worlds. But the really important thing is just to know like where you are as an organization. So like if you were to take your teams, all of your team's PRs, plot them onto this for the last quarter, plot them onto this, you would have some sort of scatter plot that is probably clustered somewhere on this chart. And I'll tell you right now, 95% of people are still in this bottom left quadrant. There are very few people who have really pushed the envelope. But that cluster could help say, we are here. This team is here versus this team who is here. We think if we adopt this tool, like maybe we want to adopt a new AI tool, where is that going to push us on this matrix towards AI-driven software development? So I'll leave you with just 3 quick final tips. So at this point, visibility is a requirement. You need to know where AI is being deployed and how it's impacting your software development pipelines. Speak to me afterwards if there's something you want help with. I have lots to share on that. Number 2 is that I am completely unconvinced at this point that AI is going to replace humans. I am, however, convinced that AI will replace very large swaths of human work. It's a critical distinction. I think for the foreseeable future, humans are going to remain a very critical component of any AI workflow that you're deploying. Like there simply is not a fully autonomous AI system that is reliable yet. And that means you need to give your humans the tools they need to manage these new challenges. And then last is don't be a vibe leader. Every AI makes everything move faster, even when you're going in the wrong direction. If you're using it in a wrong way, you're going to be more wrong than you've ever been in your entire career. And buying a new tool is not going to be a panacea for improving productivity. You need to be intentional about the guidance, about the tooling you adopt, about the training that you provide. And this is really, getting back to DevEx platform engineering, this is where you can really lean on those individuals to be the leaders on this. And then before I leave you today, I just wanted to mention, I went into a rabbit hole on this dartboard problem. I tried every single artisanal prompt crafting technique that I know and could not, these are all wrong in one way or another. Some of them got pretty close, like this one with the brick wall, but the numbers are wrong. If you can figure this out, share it with me on LinkedIn, because I want to know your process. This was a real mental teaser for me, and I couldn't believe that this was not possible. So speaking of LinkedIn, thank you for coming to my talk. If you want to stay connected, I'm on LinkedIn. It's where I'm most active. We've got the Dev Interrupted Substack. As I mentioned, it's a community of 20,000 engineering leaders who are learning about stuff like this. Do you want to take, it's a 2-minute quiz maybe to figure out where you are on that AI matrix. And spoiler alert, I only know a couple of people that are not in the bottom left quadrant. Everyone is still very early on this journey. And yeah, I'll be around after this session. I think I'm officially done now, but I can take some questions for anyone that wants to stick around. Go ahead.
how future of where humans are going to fit into this strikes me very tough to ask. Right? Have these bizarre processes that the AI requires, stamp or whatever. And yes, it requires a human, but it maybe in a trivial way, I don't know. Just the matrix.
I mean, it might feel trivial because it's. I mean, it's boiling. Like what's really happening is like knowledge work is being tokenized. Like think about any task that you do as a knowledge worker that is being turned into a series of tokens that you can plug into a model. Like that's effectively what's happening.
Right.
Yeah. Kind of, yeah. And then in that world, your goal is to spend as many tokens as possible, right?
Problems. Problem coding, right?
Yeah.
About syntax and do I use,
Yeah. That's a good point. Yeah, I mean, you're outsourcing large swaths of the problem solving and then using human as basically like a pattern recognizer, right? I mean, it's been hard for me to not view the future of like a junior software developer's life as being like a code jockey. Like you just basically ride on the back of a bunch of AI agents and just like you either hit the green button or the red button,
Successful ones will be able to have a bigger and bigger fleet, right?
Like yeah, maybe.
Super agents, writing little.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll get to you, but one last point on that. If you don't know who Jeffrey Huntley is, we've been following his work for a little bit. He's doing some really cool experimenting with agentic AI, and he lives in Australia, so he's sleeping when I'm awake, and he live streams a team of 4 agents coding for him while he's sleeping. Like it's very surreal.
Is he building a mission critical application?
I don't. We're actually we're gonna work with him to like dive into what he's doing because I can't imagine. It's probably an experiment rather than like I built a new app that I can make $100,000 off of.
Have you seen any company really AI processing and having a mission critical application? So
nothing like that yet.
That's just a specific type of switcher.
Yeah,
Most of the migrations are also done in a deterministic fashion. Only the things which are not possible they use AI for. So deterministic fashion.
Yeah.
But more like an addition, not like an AI.
Yeah.
That's what the A2A range and range. Yeah, that would be regimes. We started having more of those orchestrator agents that actually orchestrating other agents.
Yeah.
NVIDIA is already.
It's gonna like turtles all the way down. This is the infinite regress problem. It's just going to be layers of agents that sort of build a hierarchy of decision making, right? Yeah. So.
Probably you mentioned I feel like it's like a platform to like some centralized person to do that.
Yeah.
Product teams are interested just
yeah.
They're possible. But I just think that the product teams still have to like do AI work.
Yeah.
I don't know. Do you have any advice for like how to like take on that responsibility and justify like doing that while also still having the other work?
Yeah, we've definitely seen a trend of the people who formerly were or still are platform engineering or DevEx leaders. Like they are the people who the AI enablement task is being handed off to. And I think really the most important things we can be doing right now. And actually, the CEO of our company, he said this not too long ago that he believes 2025 productivity is going to decrease because we're being disrupted by all of these new tools. We're doing a ton of experimentation, or at least you should be. And much of that is failing and not going anywhere, but some of it is going somewhere, and we're learning something from that and adapting and improving. So I think we do need to have a recognition that this is disruptive. Like literally everyone is in knowledge work is being disrupted right now. So not only you, but your competitors as well. So it's not like you're falling behind because of this disruption. So I think what it really comes down to is giving that space to experiment with reasonable guardrails, and then normalizing like this culture of sharing wins. Like like we call it the AI Council. It's like a group of people who are, we're like deep into the GPT rabbit holes, and we really understand the technology. Yeah. and and so we share amongst ourselves, we share ideas with other teams. We even try to help other teams build workflows that solve their problems. So I think that's critical. Like provide space for teams to experiment, have somebody who's overseeing like that rollout, and just accept that you're not going to get 10x productivity this year. It may actually be a slight decrease so that you can build a better next year. So
about the observation when it comes to legacy code. So our observation is that it's less helpful in the context of legacy code. And the AI can also, if someone doesn't take care, quickly create additional technical debt in legacy code. And in the end, it's getting more messy, and the messiness, the helpfulness of the AI.
I think eventually there's going to be a product that you have a human who guides a model through training itself on your legacy code, and then you'll be able to use that to actually like get useful information out of it. Because I think it's just a matter of whether or not there's like a large volume of accessible and effective like knowledge resources around it, right?
Like often it's not even documents.
Right, exactly. So
like archaeologists.
Yeah, you can have an archaeologist GPT that helps you on. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm curious if you talked to anyone, whether through Dev Interrupted or about like the concept of software engineering as a craft and like people's passion for it. So like a couple of like somewhat notable folks that come to mind, like DHH, Brian J, Austin Market too, are very opinionated about like, I got into this because I like writing code, right? Like, I have a passion for doing it. And like, I'm just curious if you come across like in your conversation with other people that have expressed that opinion, how they.
Yeah. Well, I mean, going back to that matrix I had, you can see that trend in the data where senior developers are still far more likely to write code themselves. Yeah, it's. I'm actually going to flip this on the head a little bit. I think what is likely to happen is we're going to see like celebritized code creation. So like, think about the concept of like disposable code. Like you can create code for like if you're not trying to deploy it to production, you can now just create code to solve a problem. It may just be a one-off problem, but it's so simple to just spin up a bit of code, run it, and then forget about it forever. It becomes like ephemeral at that point. And that's going to be something that everyone has the capability to do. So yeah, like disposable code, I also think like code is art. Like people will start viewing like code generation almost like an art form, because like a creative person who may not have ever touched code before can now work with an AI bot or agent to like build something that like it's not going to be like deployed to production and like have user data. Yeah, I think for the people who are really invested in the craft, it like the reality is probably that, just from my opinion, for what it's worth, is that they are going to be much more focused on decision making with AI, and the actual creation is going to get outsourced because AI is just so much faster at doing it.
I think it's like a compiler, right? Somebody used to write machine code, and then there was code. So I'm gross. Oh my gosh, don't have to write the same code over and over again. And then, oh, how about C, right? It's so almost, right? And you know, you keep it's just another level of language. You really coding,
Yeah.
coded feature, however you explain things.
Yeah.
And we have to explain things to the compiler. It's just another DSL on top of it.
Yeah.
David, I used to make the same argument, and now I realize the difference here is that it's not deterministic. Whereas previous technologies were deterministic.
Oh, Now, the result turns deterministic, but the models are still right. You copy the same LLM everywhere, but there's some level of determinism. It's just,
it's well that like the
time of day comes out with a different
context. It always can come out with it.
Exactly. So it's deterministic. You're just coming outputs. It's like the three-body problem.
And the model versions, the next version, the models change.
Yeah. But the compilers change all the time, right? And that's why we're doing all these upgrades of legacy systems. Because hey, spring that doesn't work anymore, right?
I think the point is that the natural language, not the way, maybe the context gets more specific, but it stays
right. The precision and that
the DSLs or programming languages, they didn't stop that. So
remember the chunks we had, like even now in the context really good. Regular expressions, the regular expression is, a lexical analysis that the put using your screen, right? And then you see. Well, the AI is context is the entire LLM and your
yeah, but the source data, the rules you apply to it, that is deterministic, right? Even if there's a probabilistic operator.
Even like Monte Carlo. That's a deterministic process, but it always comes out with a random number.
Yeah, it's a good comparison. Go ahead.
You mentioned a lot about this. You said you had a lot to share. Is there any insight you provide on like how organizations can measure
AI? So shameless plug. LinearB, the company I work for, this is our product. We sell metrics to companies. We are increasingly focused on like measuring the impact of AI. A lot of people are like, well, the first wave was like people focusing on like the number of lines that developers accepted and the number of developers who are actually using it, and like that's kind of interesting, but at the same time, like every time I join a new company, because I do a lot of content, I get a Grammarly subscription like without like I don't even negotiate it. It's just like I walk in the door and it's like I need this tool, and they're like, of course, it's $30 a month. Like, why would we not give you a $30 a month tool for your job? And I think like AI co-pilots, like that kind of stuff, it's the same way. Like it's not something that you're not going to ask developers to justify like, are you more productive because we spent $20 a month on you? So that was okay-ish in the early days for doing all the initial research of like what are the actual productivity improvements of this first wave. Now that we have a better sense of what the reality is, which as I mentioned is like 10 to 30%. I think that's less useful. It's more about like a lot of the existing frameworks. Some of what they measure may become less relevant, but a lot of it I think will still continue to be pretty relevant. Like, did you deliver what you expected to deliver on time? Like as a team, as an organization, like that is still going to be valuable even when AI is doing a lot of the work. How quickly do you get software like from idea to production, like your cycle time? Like that is still going to be something that you want to track, particularly like in the middle stages, like the code review, because that's one of the big areas that gets bottlenecked. You don't want that. Like if that becomes a bottleneck, you want to know that it's a bottleneck within your pipeline. I think long term, there's going to be more like, we're starting to help organizations who have adopted like multiple models, like actually track which models were used for like which PRs. So you can maybe do some like A/B testing or like stuff like that. Yeah, it's still a little like beyond just like surface level things. Like code reviews are going to be more intense. But I think, it's a combination of like existing metrics and then just understanding, like just having that awareness of like this AI model is putting code into this part of our code base. Like I think that's going to be particularly important, particularly considering how like one AI model can perform completely different from another AI model at the same task. There are tasks that I will always take to Claude. There are tasks I will always take to Chat GPT, and it takes some like fluency to know where those lines are. Now that you have me thinking about it, maybe once I get more than like 3 or 4 AI models that I'm using. Right now, I'm pretty much just Chat GPT and Claude. Those are the 2 that I've been sticking with. Yeah, actually, just and maybe this will be my last point. I have found that softer prompts sometimes helps. Like, don't ask it to make a decision. Ask it to like predict what the best decision might be. Well, again, thank you all for joining. I don't want to hold you from lunch for too long, but